Hello, thank you for joining us, everyone, and welcome to our co-parenting and coffee event, Setting Healthy Co-Parenting Boundaries. Today, we have Arisha Smolarski joining us in this important topic. Arisha is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified co-parenting coach, mediator, and award-winning author of Cooperative Co-Parenting for Secure Kids, the Attachment Theory Guide to Raising kids in two homes. Sorry. And if I understand correctly, we have, I think you're running a special on the book, 20% off for
That's
1 week, and it includes some free downloads.
Yes, that's correct.
Arisha, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want to say to everyone who was here today, being here is one of the greatest gifts you can give to your child. You are saying, I need help, I need support, and you're asking for it and you're showing up. So thank you all for being here today.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. In today's interview, Arisha will discuss healthy boundaries in co-parenting with a special emphasis on effective communication, protecting children from conflict, and more. Drawing on her extensive experience as a therapist, she will also explain the reasoning and behaviors behind her recommendations, helping co-parents gain a deeper understanding of the underlying factors at play. We'll also want to take as many of your questions as possible. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Arisha, to set the stage, how would you define a healthy boundary in a co-parenting situation? And how is it different from shutting the parent out?
Great question. Before I define what a healthy boundary is, I want to look at what unproductive or less effective boundaries are so that we can really clarify the difference because it can be confusing. So let's think about boundaries as being on a continuum. On one side, you have more loose or porous boundaries, and those can look like struggling saying no. Maybe you're over accommodating, then you feel resentful. Maybe you might be oversharing with your kids or with other people. And perhaps you're accepting mistreatment and then become more emotionally desperate. And underneath that is a fear of abandonment. You want to be loved, you want to be needed. Maybe you learned as a child that you need to put other people's needs before yours as a way to maintain love and connection with the caregiver. It's also a way of avoiding conflict so that you can be the good parent and maintain connection. So this was actually my struggle. I have more, I'm working on it still, loose boundaries. And early on in my co-parenting relationship, I still allowed my ex to have a key to my apartment. Red flag number one. um, because he moved out and I wanted to make sure that he still felt comfortable. And I wanted our daughter to feel like things might kind of still be the same and that we just were buddies and he could come and go. Meanwhile, every time he would come in, he would just sit on the couch. And of course, I didn't feel really good about it. So
Right.
I would bring in tension, right? So I was sending these mixed messages. On one hand, I was saying, yeah, sure, come on in. And then I would be upset or I'd be tense or awkward. And of course, my daughter was going to feel that, right? So when we have loose boundaries, it can leave us staying connected to an old relationship a little bit more enmeshed, too close. For some people, it can be a signal of codependency. When you're happy, I'm happy. Um, and it really can lead to more conflict, tension, and of course, a lack of protection for my own limits. And then on the other hand, you have rigid or more walled off boundaries. So that can look like if you're trying to control another person or an outcome through really hard defensive no's, withholding information, stonewalling, or perhaps you have really strict or rigid rules with your kids and you can be very dismissive. And underneath that is often trauma. Maybe you experienced emotional or physical abuse in some way. So your personal space was invaded. Or maybe you had a very critical parent. And perhaps also in your home, that's what was modeled to you, though. So using fear as a way to teach. So for you, keeping people out is a way for you to stay safe. So an example of this is maybe dad is conveniently not available when mom has designated FaceTime appointments with her child, FaceTime calls with her child. And then he says, well, whenever you call, you're disrupting our quality time, you're invading my parenting time. That's an example of walled off boundaries. And the impact, as we can see, is it cuts off relationships. It makes it impossible to co parent. It creates a lot of frustration and moves towards conflict. And for kids, both walled off or porous will cause confusion. It puts them right in the middle. It has them take on roles that shouldn't be theirs, like managing adults' emotions, or perhaps they start to have loyalty binds and feel like they have to protect one parent or another. You might also see behavioral issues or also maybe some physiological or emotional disruptions. So they're destructive, they're exhausting, and unproductive. Okay, what are healthy boundaries? So, healthy boundaries are clearly defined limits and agreements that are based on your capacity. What are you willing to do and not do? They are rooted in your needs and in your values and in your actions. And they must be consistent and clear. They're really about what is in your locus of control. We are no longer handing the keys of our well being to someone else by telling them to change. So, healthy boundaries are really pro social, they're good for a relationship. And there's really that balance between connection with someone else and self protection, right? There's like this energetic separation. You really can identify where you end and where the other person begins. And of course, the impact is going to be more peace, cooperation, connection to what truly matters, which in our case is the kids. So I like to think of healthy boundaries as being a fence. So a fenced in yard, right? So you have your yard and you have your fence around it, you can see over it, and you have your gate. Your gate allows people to come in and out. If you have loose boundaries, that gate is always open. People can come in whenever they want. Or maybe you don't even have one of your gates are not even there. So there's really no separation between other people and you, right? And then walled off boundaries might be a big brick wall where you're isolated and you can't see, right? I'm doing this as an example, right? Where you can't see another person and you're stuck in fear in your own little fortress. So healthy boundaries promote self responsibility and empowerment within a relationship. So they're good for you, they're good for the system, and they're good for kids.
I appreciate that you mentioned fear when it comes to the shutting out and the boundaries that are hard-walled, because it's a lot about self-awareness. I appreciate that. What
Yeah, it is.
are the most common signs that boundaries are missing or too overbearing in co-parenting? What impact do you typically see that having on kids?
Great question, because it took me a long time to pick up that there were issues with my boundaries. So I'm going to focus it on loose or walled off, right? So let's continue with my story, right? So it's a Saturday morning, 9 a.m., actually 9:15, because my co-parent was always late. And so he comes waltzing in, he sits down on the couch, and my daughter's in the bathroom brushing her teeth. And he launches into telling me that he wants to take our kid on a trip to go see his family in Colorado. And I was in the kitchen doing dishes and I just was like, whoa, what? I can't think about this right now. I don't want to talk about this right now. And I just started getting overwhelmed and I started doing all these hand gestures like, no, I don't want to talk about this right now, trying to keep it on the DL, right? And of course, my co parent's like, what? We can talk about this. She already knows about it anyway. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we were busy trying to change each other's behavior that neither one of us noticed that our child had come into the room. And it wasn't until a few moments later I look around, I was like, where'd she go? And then I saw that she was hiding underneath the dining room table. And she wasn't hiding because she was playing hide and seek. She was hiding because she was scared. So you can imagine, I just felt this woof of shame of, I failed as a mom. And I should know better as a therapist. But that was also the wake up call that I needed to find my voice and express my personal limits because what was happening wasn't working for me and it especially wasn't working for my daughter. So there are signs that you can pay attention to. And I like to think of it as three main buckets. We have emotions, behaviors, and then we have our kids' behaviors. So in the emotion bucket are all the things you're feeling. Are you feeling resentful? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Do you feel powerless or exhausted? Are you waking up every morning with that sense of dread? Oh, what is my co parent going to land on me today? Do you feel like your life is just out of control? That's a signal boundaries are needed. And then we have behaviors. What are you noticing that is happening or not happening? So this is, looking at, are there a lot of schedule shifts happening? Are you saying yes because you want to be nice? Are you not responding at all and just shutting everything off because you're too overwhelmed? Are there a lot of text exchanges that are loaded with emotions or accusations? Are you discussing logistics in front of the kid and you're seeing that they are responding to that and getting overwhelmed as well? Are you communicating? Are you struggling with being able to access your child when they're at the other parent's house? And also, new parents or new partners can definitely bring up issues around boundaries, or perhaps your ex is asking you about your personal life. No. And of course, the big one, negative comments, undermining, bad mouthing are obvious signs that there needs to be some important boundaries put into place. And then we got to look at our kids' behavior. So they are going to let you know when things are off. They don't tell you, perhaps in words, they will show you. So it's really important to notice their behaviors, their mental health, right? So perhaps they're struggling with anxiety or depression or no longer interested in activities that they used to engage in. Maybe they'll start to have mysterious stomach aches or headaches, or perhaps during transition times like bedtimes or getting to school on time, that maybe there are a lot of meltdowns or emotional upheavals that are happening. Kids perhaps might become caretakers or messengers, and they lose sight of their own needs, such as this kid. So I'm working with this co-parenting team. One has rigid boundaries and one has loose boundaries. Mom has loose, dad has reactive, rigid boundaries where it takes him forever to respond to text. He needs to think about it for 2 weeks, his way of deflecting and trying to control the narrative, right? So mom bought her kid or their kid a backpack. They spent a lot of time picking it out. They talked about the price, all the things. And child was so excited and she was using it and happy. And then dad and his new wife bought another backpack about a month later. And she was excited as well. Ooh, another backpack. Cool. But then she says to dad, but do you think mom is going to be mad? Because she spent a lot of money on this other one. And dad was like, no, of course you can use it. I'm sure she'll be fine. And then, so she uses the backpack, goes back to mom's house, and is like, I didn't want dad to be upset, so that's why I'm using this one. So as you can see, the daughter was more concerned about the feelings of her parents than whether or not she wanted to use the backpack or not. So she was busy thinking about taking care of her parents' feelings. She was in a loyalty bind, trying to protect each parent from each other in a way. And, in the session with them, they were busy, blaming each other. And I was like, you guys aren't seeing it. Your child isn't able to say, I like this, I want this, I want to play with both freely. She was too busy taking care of the parents' emotions. So that's how that can really impact the child. So looking at these three buckets can really be great signifiers that better boundaries need to be put into place.
Oh, I like that. And I like the concept of the caretaking, not just physically having to, but kids' emotional behaviors supporting that. So looking at your own emotions, your own actions, and then the kids' actions can really bring that self-awareness to it. How
Yes.
can parents set boundaries without trying to control the other parent? And what does that look like in practice? I know that's something that most people struggle with, especially those going from no boundaries to loose boundaries to now setting boundaries. How does that, what do you have for that one?
Yeah. That's the big question, right? How do we set boundaries and how do we do this in a way that we aren't controlling someone else? Because that's what everyone says, right? And we can all fantasize about the if onlys, right? But the reality is that we can't go into someone else's yard and tell them to change it up so that we can feel better about ours. And I want to be really clear on this. It only takes one parent to shift a dynamic, and that can be you. Starting this work can be hard, but it is that first step in creating more peace and stability for yourself and for your child. And this is the point that most people miss. Boundaries can be learned. And this was the hardest part of my healing. But once I finally accepted that my ex wasn't going to change, I had to step into my own authority and hold a boundary that did ultimately lead to the end of our marriage. But it also led to me stepping into my truth. So I get it. Holding a boundary is so uncomfortable sometimes. It can be scary. But once I learned how to find my voice, everything changed for the better. So I want to share this 4-step process that I developed so that you can start to create healthier boundaries for yourself and within your co-parenting team. So I call it the ABCD Guide to Healthy Boundaries, and it will be accessible also as a download for you. So A is for awareness. This is your self-discovery phase. We can't skip over this self-discovery phase. Otherwise, we're shooting in the dark a little bit, right? So this is where you have to bring in curiosity about yourself. Look at those signal buckets. What am I feeling? What am I feeling in my body? Where do things feel messy and tense? And what's happening with the kids? And then you want to look at what beliefs and narratives am I telling myself? Am I saying I have to be nice, or kindness means that I don't have a boundary or I don't have needs? Or am I being accommodating because that's what being a good parent is? Or maybe you've learned that setting a boundary is selfish. Or perhaps you have those nagging fears like, if I set a boundary, my co-parent's going to get angry or retaliate or take it out on my child. And so we really need to look at how those beliefs and negative narratives are holding you back from holding boundaries. We also need to look at our values and our needs, because that's where our truth lies. So then we go into B, which is boundaries. How do you identify what the boundary is? So boundaries can be agreements or personal limits. What structures do we need to put into place? What am I willing and not willing to do? What behaviors are okay and not okay with me? Again, it's not about changing your co-parent, but it's about looking at what is within my own responsibility, what is within my locus of control, within my fenced yard. And are these boundaries that I'm thinking about, is this aligned with my most important values? So you can ask yourself, is this about protecting my child's well-being, or is this about proving how bad a parent my co-parent is? And I really hope that this one about protecting your child's well-being is the value that you are prioritizing. And then, of course, we need boundaries. The boundaries that you set have to be consistent. Are you able to follow through on it every time? Otherwise, they don't have teeth, and your co-parent will walk all over them. So this consistency piece is really important. You ask, can I follow through on it every time? Even if it seems like things are getting better. Well, I can be flexible this time. Nope. You've got to be consistent. And I'm like a master of like, well, and I get every single time I'm like, nope. And my friends are like, told you so. So it's hard. It's a learning. It's learning. It's a little step by step. Okay. So C is for communication. You want to communicate your boundary very clearly, verbally or in writing. For co-parents, I suggest in writing. And you say it once. You don't need to justify, explain, or defend yourself. Make sure it's non-emotional and that it is child-focused. So you can use statements or make requests using I, we, but don't use you, because you will send you right into sounding like you're telling someone what to do and or blaming somebody. So for example, you can say I need, or I would like us to, but you don't want to say I need you to or you need to, because that will get you a defensive response. D is what are you going to do? So the rest is meaningless without the do. This is your action plan. What will you do when or if the boundary or the agreement is not upheld? So you're going to ask yourself, what can I do to uphold my own boundary? This is where choice comes in. This is where that authority, that sense of control, right? Your own healthy control comes in. And also you can ask for help. Do I need support from outside resources? And we're going to talk about those a little bit later. You don't have to do this alone. And the action plan should not be a punishment or a threat or an ultimatum, because that, again, actually is more walled off and will create an adverse response that you want. So you can use when then. When this happens, then this is what I will do. So let me walk you through this process that I did with my client recently. My client came in and she was struggling with feeling really dysregulated all the time because her co-parent was texting her nonstop when she had the kids, and he was just needling her all the time when she was with the kids. And she just, didn't know what to do. She was struggling with staying present with the kids. And so we talked about this, right? So we identified what her needs were and what her values were when it came to her kids. So play was a fundamental need that she had lost sight of. And presence was a boundary. Presence was one of her top values. And so we took those, play and presence, and we moved it into the B section. Okay, so what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do? Okay, so she identified, I'm not willing to respond to his texts while I'm with my children. Okay, what are you willing to do? Well, I am willing to respond when they are asleep or when they're at school. Okay, so then we made a plan on how she was going to communicate that with him and what the action plan was going to be. So she sends a text, from here on out, I will no longer be responding to your texts between these hours, and I will get back to you at 9 p.m. during the weekends or while the kids are at school. And if you do respond, or if you are trying to reach me, I won't respond until 9 p.m. So she reiterated, just the boundary on the do part. And immediately she comes back the next week and she's like, oh my God, things are so different. She's able to stay more present and play with her kids. She gave herself permission to do that. She noticed that her kids were more regulated because they had her full attention. And sure, did her co-parent still text during those other hours? Yeah. Did she look or even know that he was doing it until 9 p.m.? Nope, and she didn't care. And so that was her finding that sense of peace and a sense of, I got this, right? That she can be the parent that she wants to be. So it's these small shifts, right, that can make a huge difference. So that's a quick rundown of what the ABCDs to healthy boundaries are. And again, you can download them so that you can start to put this into practice little bit by little bit. And over time, you'll become better at it, I promise.
I really appreciate the keywords that you, excuse me, the keywords that you have throughout those A, B, C, and D. The consistency in those beliefs, the communication aspect of C, and making sure that's clearly shared. And you can't hold a boundary if they're not aware of it. I've heard myself. Absolutely. And making sure that the do part isn't treated as a punishment. This is the action I will take. To make sure it doesn't come off as that controlling aspect to the other parent.
Absolutely.
From an attachment theory lens, what do children need most when they're living in two homes? And how do boundaries help create that sense of security?
Great. So let me briefly explain attachment theory. And I go into it in much more depth in my book, but I want to briefly explain what it is. So attachment theory describes that bond between a parent and a child that a child needs for survival. So when a child is experiencing maybe tender or vulnerable feelings, or maybe they're scared about something, or they're sick, or they're experiencing a separation from a parent, they want to know, is my parent there to support and comfort me? So they're going to send out signals of distress, right? Crying or reaching. is my parent there? Can I count on them to be there with me and help me make sense of my feelings and help me comfort me and love me unconditionally and provide me with that connection that I so dearly need and make me feel like I'm their number one, right? And then that child starts to develop a secure attachment. They innately learn that their needs and their feelings matter, that they are lovable and worthy. And that then becomes the lens through which they see themselves and how they also expect the world to see them. But if a parent is absent or maybe minimizes their needs or says, go to your room and, don't be a crybaby, or perhaps the parent is inconsistent. Maybe the parent is there sometimes, or sometimes the parent maybe makes it more about their own feelings. So then the child learns, my parent can't be there for me in reliably, so I need to create some adaptive patterns to keep myself safe and secure, to take care of myself. So perhaps the child learns, I need to shut down. It's not okay for me to have emotions or feelings, so I need to just rely on myself because others won't be there. Or maybe they develop this fear of abandonment and become clingy because they're always expecting the other shoe to drop. Or perhaps they become a caretaker. So I need to caretake my parents' needs as a way to keep myself safe. So those patterns of behavior will then follow the child through into their adult romantic relationships, because the adult romantic relationship, the other adult becomes their attachment figure. And so our attachment system gets activated during times of stress, during times of separation, during times of conflict. So you may be witnessing or feeling or experiencing either your co-parents or your own maladaptive attachment patterns that are showing up. So understanding this can help you understand what your kid needs to be secure, because that's what we want to foster. We want to foster a kid who feels innately that they are worthy, have this self-confidence and a healthy self-esteem, right? So I want to share that, and you've probably heard this before, but the research really is clear on this. It only takes one parent to develop and to nurture a securely attached child. And there's this wonderful quote by Nadine Burke Harris, who was California's first Surgeon General, who studies ACEs. And ACEs are the adverse childhood experiences. And divorce is considered to be one of the top 10 ACEs. And this is what she says: these pups are not damaged goods. They're not defective. If they get a safe, stable, and nurturing environment at an early age, the biology says that this sets them up to develop a healthy stress response system in adulthood. So, boundaries in your own home can help create that safe environment so that your kids can weather the ups and downs of life. That is the key to resiliency. So, boundaries are a safe container. They are the consistent structures and routines that create that stability in and between both homes. And even if it's just you doing it, you still can create that consistency in your own home. So Lisa D'Amour has this wonderful analogy, the swimming pool. So the swimming pool, right, has the concrete edges, and they offer that safe structure for the kids to then explore in the water, right? So when children are babies or little or toddlers, they have to hang on to the edge, right? Because they don't know how to swim by themselves yet. So they're hanging on, and that's us. And we help guide them. Maybe we teach them how to swim. Maybe we go out in the swimming pool with them to make sure that they don't drown. But they rely on that swimming pool edge. As our kid moves into teenage years, they start to push off of the edge and swim on their own, make mistakes, hang out with their peers, but they will look back and swim to us to catch a breath. Are you still there? Even if I'm pushing off of you, I just need to know that you're still there. So if you think of yourself as, we need to be that safe container, that's what boundaries are. They are firm, they are loving, and they're the limits so that kids know what to expect. Because when kids know what to expect, it helps decrease anxiety, it develops more trust in themselves and an ability for them to learn how to make healthy choices. So again, when you set these boundaries with your kids, they must be consistent and clear and appropriate to the issue. What you want to avoid is the because I told you so or punishing or shaming as a way to teach. That is more in the walled off boundaries. And you're going to get more defiance, and then you're going to teach your kid to have walled off boundaries. Or if you're too permissive with loose boundaries, that's going to create anxiety for your children because they don't know what to expect. They don't know where the wall is. The water is just flowing everywhere. It's difficult for them to be able to hold on to that secure structure. You also don't want to undermine the other parent's rules because that creates confusion for your children. So I get it. For some of you, you may not have been modeled healthy boundaries, and it can feel really hard to parent when the other parent doesn't have the same boundaries as you. So you want to really lead with empathy and connection with your child, and also give yourself some grace that this is learning for you, because not everyone was modeled healthy boundaries. Maybe you're afraid also that your kid won't like you. You're so mean. Dad lets me watch, 5 hours of TV. Why don't you? And that can sting, right? I want to be liked. Oh my gosh, does my kid not like me? That's all your stuff. That's all things that come from your past. So this is an opportunity for you to heal that and for you to not pass on intergenerational unhealthy boundary setting. So what you can say to your kid is, I get it. Empathy, right? You really want more TV time. And maybe you are having more TV time at your dad's house. And that can be kind of confusing. I understand. You know what the boundary is here, that we have half an hour before bed, and then, we get our PJs on. So in 5 minutes, I'm going to turn the TV off. And they might be like, no, I don't want to do this, right? And then you stay with them. So part of holding a boundary is, can I also help my child develop frustration tolerance? I know you're frustrated. I know you really want that. That's okay. I'm here with you. And you hang out. And that way they develop, that's that like edge of the pool. You're there. They can push off you. They can bang on you. They can say you're mean, and you are solid. That's what creates that secure, safe environment that Nadine Burke-Harris was talking about. And then, of course, boundaries between co-parents, as we mentioned before, really helps the kid feel confident that they've got their parents to take care of their life. Actually, last week I have this game that I play with my kid. It's called Talking Points, and you can play it at dinner. And each person pulls a card with a prompt. And my child she's 14 years old, so she got the card, "What do you admire most about your parents?" I was holding my breath, like, oh gosh. And she, right? I was like, oh no, what is she gonna say? And she said, I just like that you guys have figured out how to get me to all my after school activities and figure out how to get me to my sleepovers and arrange all of the travels that I like to do. I was like, okay, we're doing it, right? So the boundaries that we've set in place for us in communication has let her feel like she can just be a kid, grow, play, experience life, and she knows that her parents will be there to handle her life. She has no idea how we do it and who does what, and that doesn't matter. So yeah, healthy boundaries between co-parents also allows your kids just to be free to be kids.
I appreciate that you worked in not just the boundaries you set with your co-parent, but the boundaries that you set with your kid in order to practice that ABCD that you're identifying and help structure not just your connection with the kid, but how you co-parent in order to better set that stage, that attachment theory as they grow. That is beautiful. I'm also seeing a theme here, consistency. I'm almost surprised that your C in the ABCD is not consistency, but it's communication. So when it comes to communication, what are the core rules of engagement for co-parents surrounding boundaries? Excuse me. Where to keep focus, what to avoid. I know we're trying to find the Goldilocks here of boundaries, but what is that core rule of engagement that you would like to share with our co-parents today?
Yeah. So I always say that I'm child biased. So when I have two people in my room, I'm like, hello, nice to meet you. By the way, I want to let you know I'm child biased. You're both right, you're both wrong. The only perspective that matters is the child's perspective. And it's so amazing to see the relief that comes over the parent's face because they've been so busy in trying to be, I'm right, and trying to convince other people their perspective. So taking that off, it's like immediately aligns them on, oh yeah, someone else is thinking more about my kid than we are. So we have to focus on the child. And yes, consistency is a through line. So it doesn't have its own, it's through everything.
That's true.
So we need to focus on your child, their schedule, their health, their education, their safety, their well-being, right? All of those things. And every message that you send should pass this test. Is this about protecting my child or prioritizing their needs? Or is this about me and my feelings about the other parent? And so I've developed in my book, I talk about this and I help the co-parenting teams that I work with develop this thing called Team Kiddo. And because a team has a united goal of winning, each team member has different roles and responsibilities, and together they work for the ultimate win. And for co-parents, the ultimate win is raising a happy and secure child. And so it's important that your team operates and communicates like a nonprofit. And you can think of the two of you as a steering committee where you have co-parenting meetings to talk all things kiddo. So your co-parenting meetings can be with a therapist, and often I set that pattern, and then they go off when they don't need me anymore, and they still have co-parenting meetings, maybe once a month or every 2 weeks or weekly, whatever works. If you can do this, and I know not everyone can do this. I know that sometimes I'm talking a little bit like ideal, but I do work with a lot of people who come in all over the place, super messy, and we get them organized around Team Kiddo. So you want to agree on a communication platform. And one of the biggest tenets that comes up all the time is let each other know first so that your kids are not your messengers and they don't hold secrets. Because when they know about a big event or a big situation or a big change or a new person coming into their life and the other parent doesn't know about it, it puts them in a position of having to hold a secret. So that's a really heavy burden. So if you let your co-parent know first, that takes that burden off the children. So before I jump into the rules of engagement, I want to share some of the communication pitfalls that I see people falling into. So you want to avoid relitigating the past. You really want to think about shifting from that romantic mindset, which is, how do I get my emotional needs met, all my attachment needs met from my ex, and into parenting mindset. What do we do to prioritize our kid? Team Kiddo. You want to avoid the tit for tat. Excuse me. Well, I changed the schedule for you last time, so you should do it for me this time. That's not going to help you. It's not a very good negotiation strategy. It will lead you into retaliation or punishing, and that is more walled off and threatening language. You also want to avoid over communicating, sending lists of explanations of why and all of that, or emotionally driven emails or texts. And this one, often people miss, overcompensating. You want to avoid overcompensating to make up for your co-parents' rigid or loose boundaries. And I often see this happening at the very beginning where one parent says, during our marriage, it was her way or the highway, and I'm done. So I'm going to respond when I feel like it. She can't boss me around anymore. So now that person may have moved from loose boundaries to really rigid boundaries. And that's not going to work for the child, nor is it going to work for creating a healthy co-parenting relationship. So those are the pitfalls. How do we avoid them, right? So that's why I developed my 5 C's of effective co-parenting communication. So I'm going to walk you through them right now. So number 1, courteous and considerate. This is the foundation of respect. When we acknowledge someone else's efforts or our wins, mutual wins, or someone else's wins, people are more apt to cooperate and listen. So when people feel heard, they feel seen and validated, they are more likely to listen to you. So you can say something like, thanks for the heads up about Johnny forgetting his lunch. It really helped me prepare for the next day. Right? So you're not saying you forgot to put his lunchbox in his lunch. You're saying, thanks for letting me know. Got it. Number 2 is be concise and clear. Really make sure that your texts, your emails are brief, are only focusing on child-focused topics, one topic at a time. Use bullet points. And the who, what, where, and when are your friends. That's it. Focus on the who, what, where, and when. Number 3 is child-focused. I jumped ahead. Facts only, no emotions, no past history. Is this a topic about our child, or is this about my need or my emotions? Move it back into child-focused topic. Number 4 is curiosity. So this one is really, really important. You want to ask a question instead of assume. You want to ask instead of making an accusation, or you want to ask instead of telling someone what to do. Questions invite collaboration and will reduce the defensive response because everyone wants to feel like their opinions matter. So when they feel like they are part of a solution, that it's co-created, they're much more likely to be able to buy into it. So for example, instead of saying, kiddo's always tired when I pick her up from your house on Sunday mornings, you're putting her to bed too late. That's obviously an accusation. Instead, you can say, what's the bedtime routine like these days? I want to make sure we're aligned. So you can hear the difference already. Number 5 is confirm. So you want to acknowledge receipt, a short thumbs up, or let your co-parent know, got it, I'll let you know by 5 p.m. tomorrow if you're feeling overwhelmed or you need time to respond. Or in your request or in your message that you send, you can say, please let me know by Friday at 5 p.m. And I know that not everybody is going to respect that. But if you are keeping your side of the street clean, that's all we can control. So courteous creates respect. Concise creates clarity. Child focus creates purpose. Curiosity creates cooperation, and confirmation creates trust. So again, this is not about, well, my co-parent isn't doing that. We can't control them. It's what are you doing? You keep your side of the street clean. Judges like to see this, and it helps you feel more empowered.
I love that. I love the courteous aspect. The child-focused is really true, that the aiming towards the same goal, we can all get there, figuring out how to get there, remaining curious. The confirmation, my co-parent and I, our favorite is 10-4.
10-4. That's a good one. Oh, I like that.
Now, I will say this is going to get a little trickier. And we all hear theories and concepts, but then it becomes the how, and applying this to real life situations. And as much as we want to remain courteous towards our co-parent, how do we truly do that? Especially, how should co-parents handle boundaries in a high conflict situation, or when one parent doesn't respect those boundaries? And when do these tools work with parallel parenting, if they make sense in parallel parenting? And how do we make that become a healthier option in parenting coordination?
Yeah, this is the piece where everyone's like, I feel so
This is
overwhelmed.
what they were waiting for.
Yeah. Well, I think everything, right, overarching is leading to, it isn't about your co-parent. And I think a lot of people come in when I hear them on the phone feeling completely like distraught. And the work we do is, again, it's like, what is within your locus of control? And what resources can you use to help you? And, so when your co-parent is just not playing ball, maybe they're not following through on the co-parenting plan. Perhaps they're using coercion, or they're completely walled off and not responding to a simple request for a travel time, right? And they're just ignoring. And we get all caught up in the emotional aspect of it and like feeling out of control. And so a lot of this is about shifting from that helpless place into what can I do? And so you can ask for help. And this is part of the action plan, right? In the do section. Sometimes you can't do it all by yourself. So maybe parallel parenting is an option for you. So I just want to like say that out of the gate, right? So parallel parenting is not a failure. Sometimes parallel parenting is a boundary that is staying true to your top priority. That is putting your child first and decreasing conflict, because conflict is the number one issue that causes harm to your child. And so if you need to decrease overlap or find a neutral place to do handoffs, or really not communicate very much, or only communicate, via parenting apps, which most of you probably are already because you're here, that's okay. I don't want you to think that co-parenting is the only way, and if you aren't co-parenting or being collaborative, then you're not doing good for your child. No, it's about decreasing that conflict. So, and I also want to mention that I know that I mentioned earlier, no response can sound like walled off, but when you're really intentional in a high conflict situation, silence actually can be a healthy boundary when it's grounded in your values and your needs. When it's grounded in, I am not going to accept that behavior. That's not okay with me. This is what I'm going to do. You're not telling someone else, stop talking to me like that. You're being abusive. You're saying, due to our interactions that are toxic and unhealthy, I will no longer respond to your text or email. I'll only respond in our co-parenting app and to child items only. And then you do not respond to anything else, to the accusations, to the blame, to the every little needling that they say just to get you. This is using like systems like grave rocking, that I'm sure a lot of you have read about and that you guys have talked about here. So bringing in those resources can be very helpful, because now you're focusing on protecting your peace, but also protecting the stability of your child. You can also use therapists. We can be helpful in helping you guys create better systems of communication. If you go in on your own, a therapist can be very helpful in walking you through how to set healthy boundaries. Because again, sometimes an outside perspective can be very helpful in helping you find what actually are your needs, what actually is the main purpose for you. How do you get out of your like unhealthy narratives? Do your own trauma work. That is so essential to shifting the narrative and how you gain more control in situations where someone else is trying to take control away from you. Mediation also is very helpful if you can get your co-parent into mediation. But again, it's an outside resource that can help you make decisions if you're struggling at doing that between the two of you. A parenting coordinator also is this is like where you may need to escalate a situation. It's a parenting coordinator are often therapists, and they really help the parents stay focused on and helping make decisions, the day-to-day decisions, creating structures and resolve disputes, but outside of court. So they really act as a neutral third party between the two parents. And so for an example, you might call upon a parenting coordinator if, like, for example, your co-parent isn't responding to that request for a travel. And let's say in your co-parenting plan, you have identified that both parents need to agree within a certain amount of time to travel, unless there's a really reasonable issue around it, right? And this actually came up with one of my clients. She sent that request within the right amount of time, 2 months. So she sent the who, what, where, and when, and her co-parent did not respond. So she sends message number 2. Similar, grounded in the who, what, where, and when, ticked off all the boxes. It was very clear, very consistent, and he still didn't respond. Number 3, and we're like, okay, so it's really the third one. You don't need to do it over and over and over again. So at that third email, she adds in there, I'm noticing that I'm not hearing from you. And so, in order to stay, compliant to our co-parenting agreement, I'm going to be communicating and contacting our parenting coordinator. I wanted to let you know first. And that then is staying true to the boundaries that you have set up, your agreements, right? Your co-parent is not. You are. And you're staying consistent with that. You're not sending a million texts. You're not using accusations. You're not getting overwhelmed. You're just staying true to the truth, right? And bringing in some support. Um, here's a story actually of a good friend of mine. So she is co-parenting with someone that I would say is truly more narcissistic, and I'm sure some of you are experiencing that as well. He's bad mouthing her. He drags her into court as often as he can. He's trying to take control of all the decisions. He's definitely really good in mediation and has gotten a mediator to agree with him on things that are like, what, right? So very savvy. And she, on the other hand, I love her, but she has really struggles with holding boundaries, right? She is the ultra caretaker. She wants to be nice. And so she just can't hold a boundary in her own house. So her child now is bringing in some of these negative comments like, you're just like, selfish, mom, and you're not spending money on this and this or whatever. He's repeating the negative narratives, the untruths that his dad is telling him. And she's crumbling, right? She can't hold the boundary. She can't hold the boundary with her ex. And it got to such a degree that the child, he was about 7 or 8 years old, started talking about self-harm. And he was talking about suicide. So all of a sudden, our alarm bells, I was like, you need to get this kid into therapy. And because, it's a crisis, finally, they were able to get into therapy because dad was not allowing it before. Sometimes a child, when things get really bad, will reach to these kinds of extreme ways of getting the parents to pay attention. I need you guys to focus on me now. I want you guys to be in the same room together. And so they might use self-harm or suicide as a way to do that. You always need to take it very seriously. It is the wake-up call. And it was Audrey's wake-up call. She started realizing like she needs help. So, I helped her get a better lawyer. We talked about what, boundaries are. She started really doing much more reading on gray rocking, what that looked like. And because it got to this extreme, the court started noticing and they appointed minors counsel. So minors counsel really helps the child have, more of a voice. They look into what's going on in the parent's home. They talk to the therapist, the teachers, etc., so that the child's perspective actually can come in. And that's when everything changed for them, is because what the minors council was able to see was that mom's house was actually the safer house, and that the structures that she had already put into place, like the school he was going to, that dad was trying to dismantle, were actually really good for the child. He was thriving there. And so the minors council really helped support her in court. So these resources are readily available. And I want to reiterate that the calmer and more business-like your communication is, the harder it is for a high conflict co-parent to justify their behavior, right? The court system, the people who are looking, it just starts to unravel at a point. And the better that you look to any third party who reviews your messages later. So it's important that you aren't reactive, but you make intentional choices to reduce conflict on your end.
I have to take a second to apologize to the audience. Miss Arisha, you really nailed that question when I didn't deliver it correctly. I'm so sorry.
That's
Thank
okay.
you. So to clarify, I think everyone's going to have to go back and watch the recording of this, not trying to get extra views, but the question was, how should co-parents handle boundaries and high conflict dynamics where one doesn't respect boundaries, and when do tools such as parallel parenting, mediation, and parenting coordinator become helpful in this. So thank you, Arisha, for answering that. I hope I didn't cause too much confusion. And
Okay.
I really appreciate your statement. You know, when you do have to use these tools, you're not failing. You know, don't feel like you're failing. Kind of go back into that, giving yourself grace. You know, sometimes in order to hold the boundaries, you need the assistance. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just want to say to
Coping.
that
Oh,
point
go ahead.
before we move
Sorry.
on, because it just came in, is like in my book, I talk about community. And sometimes we need community. We can't parent, we can't do all these things by ourselves, right? And it really is so important that you surround yourself with a support system. And some of that support systems may be people like I talked about.
I I completely agree with that. A village, or you know, maybe some of the, you know, village crazy people. It's okay. Makes it more interesting. Again, thank you. Hopefully I delivered this question correctly. So I'm going to read it right off the queue for you. If conflict has already spilled over to the kids, what are the best next steps to protect them, repair trust, and what does healthy recovery look like? We've kind of discussed, you know, setting boundaries, establishing that, but in situations where it feels like it's gone too far, how do I repair that? How do I fix that?
Yeah. So I want to start by saying something to everyone in this room who feels anxious or maybe shame that your kid has already been exposed to too much conflict. It's not too late. It's within your grasp. The research on childhood resiliency is actually really clear that kids are not traumatized by hard things happening. They are harmed when they are alone in navigating it. So, a safe and comfortable or comforting parent who shows up afterwards to hold their hand and guide them through it and help them make sense of their feelings and their experiences is what helps them build that important resiliency. So the question isn't, did I mess my kid up forever, or is my co parent messing up my kid? No, the question is, what do I do starting today, and how can I show up for my kid from here on out? So it's within your grasp. And I'm going to repeat grasp because I created this acronym that's based on the word grasp to remind you that we can repair harm and we can move our children back into a place of safety and security. And it can help you also move from that anxious and more helpless feeling to feeling more empowered. So let's break this down. G is for ground. You need to ground yourself first. This is like the everything that you hear always, you got to put your mask on, the airplane analogy. You got to put your mask on first before you tend to your child. And that's absolutely true. We need to be self-regulated. We need to be in our own centered, grounded place before we can help our child. So R is for responsibility. Own your responsibility in the way things have been. This is not about throwing your co parent under the bus. This is about you showing that you can be accountable. So you can say something like, I know that things have been really tense, and your dad and I have been having a hard time keeping you guys out of the middle. And that's not fair. And that's not your job. I'm really sorry. And I'm going to do better to make sure that you don't have to be in the middle anymore. So you notice you're using I because you cannot promise something that the co-parent is going to do or not, but you can promise and be accountable to your own actions. So by doing that, you're plucking them out of the middle and you're handing them a safety vest. And you're also teaching them accountability. You're modeling accountability. We can make mistakes, we can repair, that's okay. But we got to own it. A is for acknowledge. So this one is about acknowledging, validating the emotions and the experience that your children have been going through, right? This way they feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel understood. You don't want to try to fix it or change it or make excuses. So you can say, I can imagine how hard it's been for you. It's probably been confusing and uncomfortable. Is that true? Yeah. Tell me more. Okay. That makes sense, right? So words like that, you don't have to say a lot, are really just validating and helping the child feel heard. And you can reassure them, this is not about you or anything you did or anything you need to do to figure this out. Your job is to be a kid. We both love you. And these issues are adult issues. They have nothing to do with you. So when you acknowledge their feelings and their experiences, you help them create clarity within themselves, right? They're no longer confused. Often when a child carries like these emotional burdens into, and becomes trauma, it's because they're stuck in this confused place, right? Like, is this about me? What do I do? Like, I love mom, I love dad. I don't know. There must be something about me, right? And they're confused. So this helps them create alignment between what they're experiencing and what you're saying. And you're basically saying, I believe you. Yes. And they're like, oh, okay. What I'm experiencing makes sense. And now my mom has validated or my dad has validated it. And I can hand it to them or release it and move on. So it takes them out of that feeling of being alone, because when they're alone, that is what creates the trauma, is when they're alone in experiencing these difficult situations. So again, we can be with our children. So safe space, sorry, I got lost in that one for a minute. Safe space, you want to create a safe haven for your child's nervous system so that they can unload. As I mentioned before, conflict is the number one cause of harm for kids, because conflict creates stress. So stress activates the threat response system, flooding the child with cortisol. And if there is not a safe place for them to land, for their system to start to regulate, that will lead to more toxic stress. And when a child is experiencing toxic stress, where their levels of cortisol are pumping through nonstop, that's where it's going to affect their emotional and physical development. So if you can create that safe space, it can be hard. Maybe you are that safe parent and they unload and they get mad, they kick and scream, right? If you can do that, and I know that you can because you're here, that connection that you hold for them, that being there with them, will let them know that your home is safe and that you are safe. And that's the development of that security. I am worthy. My emotions are worthy. These make sense. This way they can get recharged so they can then go back out in the world and deal with stressful situations or deal with maybe a more difficult other parent. And that helps them develop resiliency. So P is for protect. Protection is the boundaries, right? We want to implement healthy boundaries with your co-parent and healthy boundaries in your own home. This protects the child from being in the middle. Everything I've talked about before, it creates those structures that they can rely on, and that is what helps them feel secure. So this framework will help you get back on track. So just to recap everything, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from everything that I said today, is that it's not too late. These boundaries you can start to put into place starting today, so that you can reclaim your peace, so you can find freedom and start to implement and create healthy boundaries and for your children, so that their home can feel safe and secure. This way they can thrive today, tomorrow, and into their futures.
Oh, that is beautiful, Arisha. Thank you so much. I really appreciate how, all of this has worked in, from the identifying the buckets, our own emotions, our behaviors, our kids' behaviors, working that into establishing the ABCD in order to identify what boundaries you may be missing or may be overbearing. Working that into maintaining the 5 C's of the rules of engagement, and really just reminding everyone out there that, grasp is, the next step is just get started.
Yeah, and focus on what's in your yard, right? We can't go in the other person's yard and say, I need to change things up for you.
And my favorite, consistency.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to be mindful of time. We are going to enter into our live Q&A portion here with Arisha. We have quite a few questions here from the audience. I love it. Thank you, team, for sending these over. Let's see. I want to get started with, if you're ready, Ms. Arisha, I apologize. First question from Gigi.
Mm-hmm.
What strategies help when one parent consistently tries to control the narrative or portray the other parent negatively? Also, how should boundaries be handled when a co-parent repeatedly interrupts phone video calls during the other parent's parenting time, despite respectful requests to stop? How can a parent protect their peace and maintain healthy communication in those situations?
Okay, so there are about 3 questions in there. Can you repeat the first one? Sorry.
What strategies help when one parent consistently tries to control the narrative or portray the other parent negatively?
Right. So if they're controlling the narrative in court, or if they're controlling the narrative in with your kid, again, people have their narratives. It's not about your perspective, your narrative, or their narrative. It's about your child, right? And so if you can focus on helping your child understand your truth, and it is not about saying anything about the other parent. So you can start to bring in your own perspective. It's not really your perspective, but like helping the child not be in the middle, by teaching them using other situations. So maybe you can talk to your kid about a friend's situation, and say, have you ever been in a situation where you love both friends, you want to be friends with 2 people, and one friend is saying like mean things about the other friend? That doesn't feel good, right? And it could probably feel a little confusing because you really like both of these friends. But I want you to know that you're allowed to be friends with both of that, and people have different perspectives. That's normal because people have different realities. So what's important is how you feel, and that you're allowed to like both of your friends. You don't need to take sides. You don't need to even take on either one of their stories they're telling about the other friend, because really what matters is like your relationship with each of those friends. Right? So you can help teach the child to develop their own truth, right? Their own sense of values, and staying centered with what really, what they want is to like love both parents. But you don't use the other parent as the example, right? You're using something that they may actually relate to. That happens all the time, right? Where kids also do the same thing, So that's how I might respond to that one, in terms of really focusing on what you can do in your own home with your child.
I really like the second question here, on how should boundaries be handled when a co-parent repeatedly interrupts phone or video calls during the other parent's time, despite
Mhm.
respectful requests to stop. I feel like that kind of ties into some of the topics that we addressed earlier.
Yeah. So there are a couple different choices you can make here. If you feel that your child is really struggling during that, we want to prioritize again what's best for the child. Is the child experiencing conflict during these times? Are they being stuck in the middle? Are they feeling uncomfortable and feel like they can't actually be open and connect with me in these moments? Is this communication for me, or is it actually good for the child? If the co-parent is constantly interrupting, that's probably putting the child in a very difficult situation. And this can be very hard, and parents often don't like to hear this, but sometimes we may have to limit that as a way to protect our child. And we can talk to the child about that. We can also bring it to the courts, right? That is where you can, if you are already in the court systems or the mediation, have mediation or a parenting coordinator, you can then escalate it and say, I'm noticing that every time we are trying to communicate, you're interrupting that, making it difficult for our child to stay connected with me, and they are experiencing conflict, which is not good for them. So I'm going to be bringing this to the courts because we have it in our co-parenting agreement that we get to have time once a week with the child, whatever the agreement is, right? And then you escalate it a little bit by bringing in a third party. So there are different choices you can make there depending on how bad it is, what's going on there.
And I think that goes a little bit into answering the other question that was presented, the how can a parent protect their peace and maintain healthy communication in those situations. I think, that kind of addresses both aspects there.
Yeah, exactly.
We have another question from our YouTube live stream. How do you set a healthy boundary when you are seen as the conflict one whenever you do?
Oh yeah, that's the big fear. When I set a boundary, the other person says you're selfish or you're bad or you're the one who's not collaborating. I have actually a
Difficult
client right
is also
now.
one I hear.
Yeah, you're difficult. Why are you being so difficult? Because high conflict folks do not like boundaries. So I think it's also important, expect it. When you hold a boundary, your co-parent won't like it. It doesn't mean you don't hold the boundary. And also you want to look at, what is my part in this? How am I actually setting this boundary? Am I actually maybe using language that sounds a little bit like telling someone else what to do? Am I this is important to, sometimes we don't really spend a lot of time at looking at what we're doing. So I've actually done this test with my co-parent. I will send a text that is the way I used to, that's loaded with little bits of criticism and things like that. And then I will send it out. We have to own our stuff, right? What is it that creates the adverse reaction, the reaction that I don't want to have happen? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so maybe I do a little bit telling what to do because I feel like I know better, right? And I can say that now with a little bit of humor, because if we can look at ourselves from a place of healing and wanting to do better, then we can start to change our own position on what we can do, right? And so, yes, so I was like, so sometimes I'll send a text just to test this out, and of course I get a really defensive response, or a non-response. And I'm like, oh, there it is again. And then, I'll wait a beat and I'll do it again in a much more following my C's. And the response is actually different. Because he really wants his opinion to matter. And, he doesn't do it at all either. He's always telling me what he wants. And it triggers me so much. I get really frustrated when he's bossing me around. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I respond, are you going to send that in a request? And right. So again, I can't control him. I can only control what I can do on my side of the street. So your co-parent may be angry. That is not your concern. They're being angry in their fenced yard. You are being consistent, clear, boundaried. You've got your A, B, C, D in there, and you say it once. You don't need to repeat yourself. You don't need to, water your boundary down by taking on their anger towards you or their accusations. Their accusations are a manipulative strategy to get you to feel less secure and to feel insecure about your boundaries. So part of the healing work for you is to become really empowered and to acknowledge your self-worth. You don't need someone else to say you're worthy for you to be worthy. You got to feel that within. And when you can really lean into that, that's when their reaction bounces off of you. Like, okay, you do you. You're having a hard time. Oh, wow. You're really getting angry and upset over there.
And I think that goes a lot into the awareness and the beliefs aspect of those boundaries. If you're setting those boundaries with that correct intention, something that's upholding your values, you're going to feel more confident upholding the boundaries, even if it's seen with conflict. People don't like boundaries. I like the statement that you made. You're going expect it when you start introducing boundaries. Expect it when you start introducing them.
Absolutely, and it really is that's why the values. When you are not walking in adherence to your own values, that's also what creates a little bit of discomfort. It's not even the reaction of your co-parent. It's like, if I'm not upholding my most important values, we can't stand behind them, right? And so correct. I really appreciate you bringing that up again.
Oh, thank you. I have a question from Dustin. How would you approach a co-parent when there is an appropriate discussion to be had about a parenting decision, But then, when there is a disagreement, the co parent ends the conversation with talk to my attorney.
Right. That's a walled off boundary. And often you can't do much with a walled off boundary. So this is where, that's why it's non-relational. It's really difficult to co-parent. You may need to parallel parent and get yourself your own lawyer. And it's frustrating, but again, you can't control what they're saying. But this is where you would really look at what resources can I invite in to help support me. But yeah, that's an example of how it feels when you have a co-parent who's doing walled off boundaries. It's difficult.
Sometimes the answer isn't everything that we're looking for, but like you said, it doesn't make it a failure, and that's why the tools and the help exist.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. Honestly, sorry.
I just want to mention it's sometimes parallel parenting is a path towards more cooperative parenting. At the beginning, people may have, like I said, at the beginning during separations, people's attachment systems are on high gear and they are highly defensive. You're seeing all of their reactivity. So maybe at the beginning, you need more parallel parenting in order to create healthier boundaries and bring in outside people. And over time, perhaps, I stay hopeful. And maybe not. Maybe the best, and I have worked, with a client who recently, after 2 years, was like, my co-parent and I, we don't talk anymore. It's the best thing ever. Thank you so much, because she realized that she needed to trying to get him to be somebody that he's not, and focused on herself. And that really changed everything for her and for her kids. So
I really like that. Another question from our YouTube live stream. How should one handle a co-parent who regularly changes the schedule last minute? I always accept because I'd rather have my kids than leave them with a babysitter or stranger, but I can never have plans.
Right. Okay. So that's an example of having loose boundaries. So ask yourself, what are my needs? That's a need one, right? What narrative am I telling myself that actually counteracts my need? Do I need, in order to be a good parent, I have to always say yes and always accommodate? No. You don't have to always accommodate in order to be a good parent. So then looking at the boundaries, right? Like, what am I willing to do and not willing to do? I'm willing to accommodate this kind of change or not, or I need X amount of time in order to be able to be flexible and take extra time. Am I able to say no? Yes, you're able to say no. I'm unable to do that. So identifying really what you're willing to do and not do, and finding the clarity in that and sharing that with your co-parent. We need, in order to make schedule changes, I need 2 weeks in advance. And then I will let you know, yes, no. If I can't, then let's agree on a babysitter. Okay. If I can, I will let you know within 48 hours. And really and the do part is, that's for you. That one is a personal limit. What am I going to do to help me stay consistent with my need to have consistency in my own life so that I can make plans? Maybe your value is personal time with friends. Okay, so how do you protect that? And then you put that action plan for yourself. And then sorry, you didn't let me know 2 weeks in advance. I'm unable to do that. And then he'll have to hire a babysitter. That's okay. Your kids are okay. For you not being there always, Becky, also, what are you modeling to your kids? You have to think about, kids are always watching us. If they see you over accommodating, because you're probably doing it in lots of different ways as well, they are seeing, and you might be even over accommodating them. You're modeling loose boundaries. But if you're modeling healthy boundaries, they are learning also, healthy boundaries, I can do healthy boundaries, and I will expect other people to also hold boundaries for me because my mom is doing that. I'm seeing her do that respectfully, right?
Risha, you might be talking to me directly. Whew, the kid's going to be okay. That one's the hardest one to accept.
The kids will be okay. And I want to, and believe me, the kids thrive in situations where we appropriately say no to our co-parent. We don't have to be there all the time to be the good parent. And even if we miss our kids all the time, if you are bending on your own needs, you're showing them my needs are less important than my co-parents, than your dad's needs. No.
I
You
like
got
that
to show them
reminder.
both, right? Both of your needs are important and the kids' needs are important too. Having a babysitter is fine sometimes. Also, a babysitter, community. Sometimes having a babysitter helps develop an external, support system that you and your co-parent can rely on. And the kid also develops more people who care about them in their lives.
I like that. I think we have time for one more question, but it's a trick one. I think there's a couple pieces to this one, so I want to
Okay.
get this one in. Question from Ramesh, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. So I apologize, audience, if I did not. My 13-year-old son is becoming aggressive, pushing
Mm.
me and his dad's boundaries. Do you believe adding consistent co parenting boundaries as a goal, part of the court order, is more helpful or harmful? He's suffering academically and socially from the lack of consistency and often referring to mom's feelings or alleged sufferings.
Yeah. Oh. So when I hear that, I listen to the child. Like I said, I am child biased, and I am hearing loud and clear that that child needs consistent boundaries in and between both homes. Absolutely. If you have those identified already in your parenting plan, yes, please. Your child is begging for them. He's showing you. He's having a hard time. And if he's starting to caretake the parent's emotions, or if he's becoming defiant and aggressive, that is letting you know that perhaps there's a lot of inconsistency. He doesn't have that, swimming pool, the boundaries around him that he can hold on to. He is screaming, please create safety around me so that I don't have to come up with my own rules, so that I don't have to pin the two of you against each other. So I don't have to manage your emotions to know whether or not I'm safe. That is he's showing you he's dysregulated. So I would absolutely look at your co-parenting boundaries. What can you do in your own home to create consistency? He's 13, right? So it's he's in this place of who am I, and who are and where and how do I relate to my outside world, my own identity, and how do I relate to my family and my parents. But he really needs to know that he can trust and rely on the consistency of structures in the house. Even if you start doing this and he starts to balk at it because he's not used to it, it's really good for him. Like, boundaries are, like I said before, are a safety vest for your child and help them feel calm, and helps them develop that, safe space at home.
All right, I'm going to sneak in one more, so I lied. Question from Allie. I grew up in an environment where I managed my parents' emotions. As a co parent, I started off having difficulty setting boundaries. Now I am struggling with feeling like I am overcorrecting and possibly being too harsh. How can I find that balance?
Beautiful. Yeah. So I just appreciate that you are doing this work. That's such a vulnerable question. That means you're on your journey already. So first of all, I would say get yourself a good therapist to help you work through the traumas, the feelings of, how you felt that you were parentified, right? You had to take on a role that shouldn't have been yours, as managing your parents' emotions. Perhaps, yeah, you learned I need to put my needs second or third or not existent. You're starting to even identify, like, maybe you don't even know what your needs are. And so sometimes when you don't even know what your needs are, you just go into this you overcompensate. You go into the strict, no, I will not, right? Like, but if you spend time in that self-discovery phase and start to identify what your needs are, what your true values are, what behaviors you're okay with and not okay with, right? Become more intentional and connected to yourself and your own healing. That's where you lean into this opportunity of not passing on unintentional, like, intergenerational wounding, right? So my message to you would be, this awareness already, that you have that awareness, is your first step, and bringing that in to moving towards, using the ABCD, get a therapist, and identifying, where you can be more consistent and not like setting, like, are you disconnecting from the relationship, or are you staying connected to what matters most to your child? Right. So those are some like things to think about. Are you using a walled off boundary as a way to protect yourself out of fear? Or are you using a boundary that's more about your child and protecting a sense of stability and consistency and their well being? So that's like, those are the little questions you can ask yourself, like, what's walled off? What's actually more healthy? Is like, is this coming from a reactive place? Or is it coming from a very grounded place where I see clearly based on values, needs, kids' needs, all those things?
Arisha, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us for our co-parenting and coffee event, setting healthy co-parenting boundaries. Truly appreciate the insight that you have been able to share with our audience. The Q&A that we got in, the audience is great. I appreciate the interaction. As a reminder, Arisha Smolarski is the author of Cooperative Co-Parenting for Secure Kids, the Attachment Theory Guide to Raising Raising Kids in Two Homes. I promise I'll get that right one day. And she does have a 20% off discount, I think, running for 1 week, and free downloads. I hope everybody
Yes.
was taking notes on your ABCD, your 5 C's, and GRASP. Arisha, is there anything else you would like to add for our
I
team?
just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Thank you all to every listener and the people who are going to be watching this later. I just want to say I appreciate you, your kids. Again, this is a gift. You're doing the important work. It's hard. It's okay, one step at a time. And feel free to reach out. I have a newsletter. My website is cooperativecounselingcenter.com, and I have Instagram and all that good stuff. So I hope to see some of you, and I wish you all the best on your co-parenting journey. You're doing the best you can, and that is great.